awesome. And I'm going to turn this over to one of our club members, Jahiro, from Bangladesh. Jahiro?
Yeah. Thank you, Ken. First time I introduce myself. I'm from Bangladesh. My name is Jahirul Islam, and I'm a young leader and entrepreneur. And I think it's on kind of we engage with the research, influence, and training of the disability community. And I'm a founder and general secretary of Team Inclusion Bangladesh Foundation. And this we have a physical disabilities, and last 25 or 6 years we suffering for this disease. I'm a CFP charcot mated tooth disease. It's a genetical disease of my family, and our elder brother and my mother also affected this disease. And last 2013, we started working with many organizations and international and national organizations of our country, and lots of diverse people to meet with the disabilities community of my siblings, and lots of experience together gather of my next couple of these days. And I'm graduated from public university. This whole name is Jahannagar University, and my subject is governance and development studies, masters from this subject. And I think this is my another achievement to working with international and national organization on the inclusion of persons with disabilities. And we achieve inclusive and sustainable development goal without prejudice. Of my personal opinion, to include our team inclusion to form skill and skill building activities, and reframing thinking about and sustainably establishing equal rights of persons with disabilities. And we also engage with the Rotary Club, World Disability Advocacy Group, and educational program and children with disabilities education. I think it's a great opportunity for our future generation to engage with the education system, like special needs education and others activities. And we achieve, sorry, and I'm also alumni of Swedish Institute, International Disability Alliance, and another University of Bonn, which SIG alumni of German Applied Science, and lots of engagement with like our new engagement with Monash University, Australia, for ICT, hearing impairment, people with disabilities. And I'm the Joy Bangla Youth Award winner 2020. It's a government recognition for me of disability inclusion of our in Bangladesh. And I personally, I try my level best to engage with people with disabilities and lots of ideas, grassroots levels, and to also promote young youth with disabilities in Bangladesh, all over the world, because we try to learning and sharing by lots of people and lots of countries to exchange our knowledge. Last three days, we really busy to our university vice chancellor and our district commissioners, lots of ideas sharing our in future disabilities footprint in our districts, also with Bangladesh, all over the world. So this is a part of this journey with Rotary Advocacy Group, World Disability Advocacy Group. And I really appreciate and really honored this group to, and thank you very much to Ken to giving opportunities to work together. And I really appreciate this is really great ideas and lots of people. And welcome to Rotary Club of World Disability Advocacy. This is, I think, lots of people to is a gathering places to our in future work together for our in new development definition through our bridge group, because it's a senior and junior lots of people engagement in this group, and try to a definition, new definition of development of disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Chihiro. I really appreciate everything you do. Chihiro is one of those people that he never sleeps, and he thinks about disability rights 24 hours a day. So we're proud to have him as one of our members on the club. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn this over to Jeremy Warner. And Jeremy is from the United States, and he's a club member also. Jeremy?
Good morning. So first of all, I want to say that I never sleep, and I am thinking about Star Wars 24/7. So Tom, I love your backdrop. So, going forward, we couple months back had a few folks who were talking about what education for kids with disabilities looks like in their different countries. And as part of that conversation, the idea came up to try to find a way for us to basically address best practices in the way to educate kids with disabilities, and find the flexible ways to do that, because everybody learns differently. And so through that, I actually spoke with a friend of my family, Dr. Mary Jo Dare, who was director of special education in Indianapolis public schools for many years, and is now working as a consultant with multiple different states' special education programs. And so I asked her if she would be willing to join us for a conversation. So going with a little different format today, not a presentation, but a conversation about what should that look like for us to be able to create an online opportunity for educators from around the world to share best practices. And then how do we then also connect that with local Rotaries to help promote and support programs for children with disabilities that are accessible within their communities. So with that, I would love to introduce Dr. Mary Jo Dare and see if she might maybe have some thoughts that would get our conversation going.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. I've actually known Jeremy since he was born, so I worked with his dad. Yeah, I was the director for a number of years. I was then a professor at Indiana University in Indianapolis over the special ed program. Now what I'm doing, though, is more on the side of families and disability rights organizations to try to get more inclusive practices for students with disabilities in schools. But one of the things that's been frustrating to me is the United States has had a special ed law since 1975. I'm not sure that we've come as far as we needed to in that time. I think we're still in some ways fighting some of the same battles. And one of those is empowering families and empowering individuals with disabilities and listening to them, because they really can give us a lot of insight. Programming is going to be different in different places, depending on what's available, depending on the needs of the individuals. But I think, and I'm very much a proponent of inclusion, because I think people with disabilities have such strengths and have a right to be in an inclusive environment as adults. And we're not going to really prepare them to do that if we promote segregation and don't find a way to better enhance our inclusive environments. I used to always say to my students and to my staff, don't look at what the student with disabilities is doing that you don't think is appropriate or doesn't fit in. Look at the environment they're in, and that includes the people around them, it includes the curriculum, and it includes the actual physical environment. What is it we need to do to change that, to be more inclusive and to be more supportive. So I guess just so you know where I'm coming from, that's a real passion of mine. And what I've done to help families kind of access systems appropriately and to give voice to families and to young adults with disabilities, because they often can tell us what they need. You know, I knew Jeremy before he had a disability, and obviously know him now. And it's amazing what I've learned from him during this journey. So I guess that's just to give you some idea of where I'm coming from and what I do. I do work with schools, but mainly working with them on developing more appropriate programs. And I also work with the juvenile system too, because unfortunately, students that end up in the juvenile system are disproportionately those, especially with emotional disabilities. So anyway, that's just to give you some idea.
Thank you. So Mary Jo, one of the questions that I know we had initially was, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, the differences at kind of an international level, that there are some nations that don't have any kind of civil rights law protecting education for children with disabilities. So what can, working at that, what can we try to promote in regards to those best practices, and how is the best way for us to reach educators at an international level?
Well, and I think families are one way to go about it, to really work with the families. They're actually the federal law in the United States was not promoted by educators. It was promoted by families. They're the ones that really were the impetus for the law being passed. So I think working with families, but also working with community agencies, you know, everyone's going to be at a different place, and you have to just look. For example, if they're in the infancy, possibly a facility for students with a particular disability is very appropriate. But through that, you can also then look at what is the community access and how can you partner with people in the community to give the students who may be in a segregated facility, how can you give them access to a more inclusive environment? So I think working with schools, because you're right, I have worked in the past with several, when people were visiting the United States and showed them our programs, and you can't expect everybody to be in the same place, but we can expect that we can all work towards getting a productive life for every individual, whether they have a disability or not. And I think that should be the goal. What is it we can do, and what kind of steps can we take leading to, and that includes working to make sure that the community is inclusive and available to everyone.
So just with that in mind, kind of here in Indianapolis, we have, you know, within all of our different, you know, public education programs, we have special education, but we also have a separate school for the blind. We have a separate school for the deaf. Can you kind of talk about why that is, or what that looks like?
Yes, I was on the school board for Indiana School for the Deaf for 8 years, so I was pretty immersed in that. It's two different things. Deafness, at least in the United States, is a culture, and people who are deaf don't necessarily promote it as a disability. And so and they are going to, by the way, combine the two schools, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because I don't know how the communication between the two populations is going to work. But I think we still need, those schools started before there was ever access in the public schools to programs for students who are blind and visually impaired or deaf and hard of hearing. And so they've kind of come up through the ranks because of that. More students are being included in their neighborhood schools. The other piece of that is a student who is deaf goes to an inclusive public school. They have to have an interpreter with them all the time. And so, especially in high school, how does that promote social interaction? And so that's what I'm saying. In some cases, I think, and of course the schools serve the entire state. So they serve some rural areas that may not have the programming. They should, but they may not. So while I think we should be moving towards more inclusion for students like that, I think we have to look at both parts of it. And I personally would love to see the schools play a different role in the future and be more of a resource to the public schools than a standalone school. And one of the reasons that they're combining is because the numbers have gone down and more students are being included. The other thing that's important to remember is you can't just include those easiest to include. When I closed our segregated facility when I was a director, and I was scared to death because I didn't know what I was going to do when I needed it. Well, 20 years later, I didn't need it. Would I have used it if I had it? Absolutely, because it was much easier. But one of the things I was warned to do was not to transition those with the least need first, and then go down to those with the greatest need, because I'm going to fight the battle at each level. And I didn't do that. I did it across the board. And even though it was a challenge, I think in the end it was better. So I would love to see those schools they have great expertise. And the Clearinghouse for the Blind is at Indiana School for the Blind. So if they could transition to having students remain in their community, because some of these students are from hours away and don't interact with anyone in their community or don't have natural friendships. So if they could then be more of a resource and possibly have satellite support centers, that would be my vision.
Keep forgetting that I'm muting. And I want to be sure other folks have opportunities to ask questions. So please jump in. But I guess my next question that I would wonder is, how can local Rotary clubs support education for kids with disabilities?
Well, and Rotary in Indianapolis already does have some relationship with the schools. And I actually did participate in some of the meetings when I was a director. But Rotary is a very well-respected organization. So I think they could certainly bring together groups of people to have local conversations as well as conversations, across countries. And I think they could be a real vehicle for doing that. Also, and I don't know how inclusive, what the percentage of people with disabilities in Rotary is. Do they having people with disabilities as their membership?
And that is kind of where that question is a big part of how this group grew out of Ken initially looking for an advisory group. I see Ralph has a hand up. Ralph is an educator as well. So I look forward to hearing this question.
Yes, Mary Jo, I really admire you for what you took on as a challenge. Yes, I am a retired elementary school principal. I had a student who was bit by a mosquito and developed Eastern equine encephalitis and was paralyzed from the cheekbone down. He also had seizures almost on a regular basis. Andrew was fantastic, and his mother came and said, "I'd like my child to enter grade 1." And I said, "I'll have to check him out." And I did. And I said, "I think we can do this." And we took it on. He came to school with a full-time teacher and a full-time nurse. And I put him in a regular classroom, just like with everybody else. And I picked the teacher carefully. I told her I was not twisting her arm to take on this child, but if I told her the story and she said, I'd like to give it a go. And it was a setup where she was going to stay with her students for 2 years in a row. It turned out that Andrew became the best teacher in the whole building. He taught us all. He was able to keep, all he could do was wink one eye for yes or wink his one eye for no. And just with that amount of communication, he made friends of everybody in his class. They held birthday parties. They always included him. He was a star of the whole deal, and it was a wonderful opportunity for everyone.
Talk about what
Yeah.
Mary said about.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, my wife just heard me talking about Andrew. One of the mothers, when we put the class together, both the teacher and I split the class and called the parents and said, Andrew's going to be in your class. Do you want to go with it or not? And one friend of my wife's told her, I was one of those parents that was hesitant about putting my child in that classroom because he would slow up her learning process. As an adult now, that former second grader her mother was watching her taking care of her grandchild. And she said, where did you develop those skills to be so understanding and so compassionate about how to handle little kids? And she said, because Andrew Zupkis was in my classroom and he taught us.
Well, and I agree with you. And kids are okay with it. It's not a kid problem. It's an adult problem.
Yep.
And it's interesting because when I first moved the students out of the segregated facility, a mother said to her son, I don't want to see you making fun of him or anything. And the son looked at her strangely and said, why would I? He's my friend. So I think kids, and the problem is if we don't include, and that doesn't necessarily mean all day. There's students that need to be pulled out for particular activities, for particular lessons, and that's fine. But if we don't, I said every child deserves an opportunity to hang their hat in a gen ed classroom. And students with disabilities don't have to earn what everyone else has a right to. And I think if we don't do that, not only are the students with disabilities not going to learn how to get along in the community at large, but students will feel that it's okay to exclude them even as adults if we promote that when they're young. So I think that's great. That's a great example.
Andrew had to be fed through a feeding tube. And the kids that got to go to the nurse's office for lunch, that was, if they were chosen for that job, that was the greatest responsibility they had.
Right.
Yeah.
I had one student that it was similar to that. The only thing he was in high school, was his big toe, working big toe. Pizza Hut worked with me to develop a device so that he could fold the boxes and could be part of supported employment. And so most of the time they're challenges, but they're not things we can't overcome. And what's interesting, technology has come so far, mainly because of wars. That's what's started promoting technology. And with what we have technologically, there's no limit to what we can do. Because, by the way, if we all live long enough, we're all going to have a disability.
You got it. Mark has said that many times. Yeah, you're right on. One last thing. Right near my school is just a K-2 school. So it was near the last week of the grade 2. And they wanted to have all the staff together for a joint meeting for Andrew. They asked me if I would cover the classroom. And I said, well, how is Andrew doing in his seizures? He says, he's getting good. He hasn't had one in 2 weeks. And I said, okay, I'll cover the classroom for this hour. And I went and covered the classroom. I was in there about 5 minutes. And I look over and said, oh, what's going on with Andrew? And he says, oh, don't worry, Mr. Hammond. He's having a seizure, but we know exactly what to do. Those second graders took over. They calmed him down. They dealt with him. They did the whole thing. And when I thought back to it about 10 years later, there were still two other girls on either side of me calming me down exactly the same way Andrew was being calmed down. Those kids really knew how to handle and work
And think
together.
of the life skills that they learned.
That they are beyond any other education you could get.
Exactly.
Hi, Mary.
So, I have a question. Dr. Mary, my thinking is now what happens with these students after they go through the public school system and then it's time to think about college? Is there any preparation for them for that situation?
Absolutely. Well, in the United States, there is a mandate for transition planning. And so starting when they're in 8th grade, you start planning for that transition. But there's also another law in the United States, Section 504, which is a birth to death legislation. And I was actually the 504 coordinator at IU for the School of Ed. So students can go to their every university, and I think this is probably international, has a disability office of some kind. Some are better than others, but they can go to that disability office and then they can take whatever documentation they had from K-12 or whatever and look at what adaptations need to be accommodated. And that should also be accommodated in college. Also, we have more online options than we've ever had. And for some students, that may be a better option, to do some online schooling. So I would think there really should be no reason that a person with disabilities can't successfully transition to higher ed. The other thing that's important is to make them become their own advocate. One of the things I initiated for students in high school was student-led conferences. So the student, rather than the administrator, was actually leading the conference because we want to teach them to be self-advocates. I have a granddaughter who is going to be a junior in high school who was just diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And one of the things that we're working with her on is you've got to be your own advocate. And that's going to be true in the community as well. So I think if we can work closely with students to have them know how best to positively advocate. One of the things I do a lot of is model for families and students how to work with schools, because most schools want to try to do what's right. Many of them don't know how. And so going in, fighting the school is really not going to get you what you want. And so I think if we can teach people how to work with not only the schools, but with people in their community, with employers, on how to positively, because some of it is just, people in my generation never saw someone with a disability in their classrooms. And so I think we've got to see everyone around us as a partner, not as an adversary.
Hi, Ken. Can I
Yes, go ahead.
speak to that? Thank you, Mary Jo, for that information. I have some kind of hands-on information because I have, well, my daughter's in law school now, but she was in college and my son's in college. Universities must have a disability office. What they're doing is they're making the students, they're putting all these requirements on the students to contact. So these are students that may have executive function difficulty, and they're putting the demands on the student to tell them when they have an exam, to make special accommodations and all that. That's a whole as I see it. And if it's not for the parents who are pulling some strings behind the scene, the student doesn't get that accommodation. The other thing is, I personally just think the name is really telling. Schools that have a disability office versus schools that have an accessibility office. The accessibility office, students are much more willing to go to, in my experience. The other thing, the disability or accessibility office does not include neurodiversity at all. So there are a few schools on the East Coast, West Coast that have these programs, some private pay, but I personally think all the flagship state universities should have a neurodiversity section. And I actually tried to contact policy people that never got back to me. So that's my spiel. Thank
And
you.
I totally agree with you. I think you're exactly right. I think I have a grandson who has executive function issues. We can work with those students in knowing how to access what they need. And eventually it is going to have to be on the person with a disability, because they're going to probably have to educate other people. Now, one of the things that they can do is get the accommodations that they should have, and that should be given to every one of their professors so that they know ahead of time, you know, when we have an exam, this is what needs to happen. Is it going to be perfect? No, because everybody's not on the same page, and everyone's knowledge base is not the same. But I think it can be done. And it may mean that families is going to have to help, but I think it should be led by the student, because what we want to do is teach them to have their maximum independence as adults. And I think
Absolutely, because they need to learn to advocate for themselves, but the time it takes for them to learn is going
Right.
to be longer. And there are plenty of students at public universities that don't get that extra time on the exam or a special place because they didn't know they were supposed to do something because they didn't read their email. I mean, it's as simple as that.
And that's a reality of life that we have to constantly chip away at. I mean, we really do, because you're exactly right. My daughter teaches at a community college in Portland, Oregon. She developed an interactive chemistry class that is accessible to everyone. They have a very strong mandate for, and in fact, are a national leader in at least chemistry, in making it accessible to everyone. But it's an evolutionary process, and that's why all of us need to be advocates for that and need to work with. You know, I was not pleased with our office and worked with them and pushed them, and I'm sure they still think I was pushy, but I think that means that all of us that are involved have to be part of trying to move it ahead, because there are going to be challenges. That's going to happen with anything.
Mary Jo, there've been a couple folks who've mentioned that they have questions in the chat. Samuel, if you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and read the question you posted, but if you want to expand on that. Samuel put in there, in Haiti, the background educational or for the deaf does involve an education stand them to go at the university. What kind of system can we put to change it in Haiti? Samuel, you want to add on to that at all?
Yes. I want to know what can you change this problem in Haiti? In Haiti, the deaf can continue to study at the university, in Haiti. It's a problem for Haiti. A deaf can continue to study at university in Haiti.
The deaf community, the deaf community is an active community worldwide. They really are. But I think again, it's a matter of pushing the university to make sure that those adaptations and accommodations are in place for students that are deaf or hard of hearing, so that they can be successful at the university. Technology is such a great tool for individuals who are deaf. And if they use the technology, and frankly, I'm sure they can partner with people in other countries even who can help them do that, who are farther along and can help them. And so I think it's a matter of collaboration, and it's a matter of everyone helping. So, and pushing. There are times, and going to whatever your body that is over the universities, going to them and finding out what they're doing to support their universities in being more inclusive and more supportive. So it's something, and I think individuals who are deaf and their organizations are a great resource to be legislators, to be advocates, to really help push those changes.
In the case, in Haiti, the deaf doesn't have the possibility to have a live independent. Sometimes the deaf enjoy to make baby, not to continue at university at the student. But it's very difficult for him to have some money to work in Haiti.
Right.
But
Thank you.
I would like to help them to find something to do to help them have independence or autonomy.
And Samuel, I think probably Rotary, we can talk about Rotary getting involved in that kind of stuff also, and doing that. I know Jahiro has a question also, and several other people.
Yes. Yeah. Hi, Mary. I have a question for your special education, because we last couple of 10 years, more than 10 years, I'm working with people with disabilities, and also children have lots of ideas to implement in our organization, and we do something focus on education. So I have a question to you. Always, especially needs, education depend on our needs and our grassroots level, depend on our areas. So our international program or our universities have not exchange program. This is a very, very important to the exchange program. Like your students came in Bangladesh, a Bangladeshi student came to your university. This is an important to knowledge exchange program, to sharing our ideas and sharing our experience to one platform, and then we do something different to work together, because after the pandemic we have a new world, and also we have use our technology to world is a globalization world, and so communicate with others too very easy. So I think this is an important thing. You thought about your experience. This is why this talent exchange program and others activities why not implemented and initiative not to initiate it in this program. Thank you.
And I have talked, after I talked to Jeremy, I've talked to several people at universities here, in different universities, and I do think there's some people very willing to collaborate with universities in other countries to help them know how they did it, and to help promote it in other places. So I do think there's some collaborations that can be developed through higher ed that can be across countries in helping to share expertise and resources.
Thank you.
Jacqueline, you have your hand up. Jacqueline's from Egypt.
Yes, hello, Mr. President. Thank you for this inspiring session. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Dr. Mary. I have just one question for you. I am here an advocate Rotarian from Egypt, and I want to ask you if we want to do a successful project to increase the awareness of school children and increase inclusion of children with disability. We are here a developing country. What are the major criteria of the successful project regarding the age group, regarding the starting points? How can we start with parents, with children, with the people with the, children with disability? What is the first point?
I think the biggest point is to focus on ability. Of
On
people with
ability. Yeah,
disabilities,
yeah.
to make sure that everyone knows they're people first and they have ability. I may have some resources. Jeremy can give you my email and maybe we can communicate because I may have some things I can send you as well. But I think also getting people to begin to look at those natural supports. What you don't want to do is promote a lot of, and that's happened with some of the students I've worked with. There's so many things thrown at them, and then all of a sudden they reach a certain age and everything goes away. And so looking at in the community at natural supports, looking at the churches or religious institutions and what they might do, because often they are a great support and it's an anchor for families at times. So looking at that, focusing, as I said, on what can we do? Because one of the things I always did was stay within my budget, but I was real creative with the things that I did. And you have looking kind of outside the box and what can we do? And having it led by families and older students with disabilities.
Oui. Like.
So I think that's what I would do. Start with those people, and there are people in the community and in the schools that want to do it. They may not know how. So I'm more than happy to talk to you, or email and see what resources I might be able to give you.
Yeah, and just to add, can we measure our success? Is it measurable?
One of the things that bothers me, they always want to measure it with test scores or whatever. A lot of the things we're talking about are measured more with stories. What it did for that individual and what it did for their quality of life. So you can measure it, but not always in the way that governments want it measured. Because number one, it takes time. And secondly, it's qualitative, not always quantitative. And so we have to look at what did it do with the quality of life. I love ethnography, using ethnography as a vehicle to capture some of this. And I've used that, and because that will really, that'll tell you whether it's really making a difference.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Jose has his hand up from Brazil.
Thank you so much, Ken. I just want to say that I am an engineer, so I am the one who is behind the creation of those assistive technology devices. And I'm just in love with Dr. Mary Jo there, because you have said so many things that we have been experiencing out there. We created a lot of accessories and a lot of assistive devices that enables children with severe physical and motor disabilities. For example, we have this one that we called Colibri. It's so easy. You just have to plug this here And by just moving head, for example, and just blinking, you can enable someone that was not able to use a computer or to use software. We also developed a keyboard that we call KeyX. I'm just showing this here because what is happening right now is exactly what Dr. Mary said. We have more than 10,000 students using this in Brazil. We have so many stories, and we have qualitative stories, and they are asking us for the quantitative. So when I went to out of Brazil, for example, to show what we had, the only question I had was, where are your proof? What is the research that you did to say that this is working? What is this? What is that? But they were not letting me try this with the children. And in Brazil, we had a very different approach, and it happened very fast. We are inside more than 650 schools. All of these schools, they have thousands of children with very beautiful stories. We have children, not children anymore, but we have people that now are going to the university because before they were using this solution that we created, for example. So actually, I would like to know with you, like, do we still have to look for all this research, or do you think that it's possible, for example, to continue trying to pilot and let teachers and principals see what we have been doing, for example, so far?
I think it's critical to pilot it, because that's where you're really going to see, and they're the people that then will become your advocates and will begin to, it'll spread that way. Because I totally agree with you. It's not going to be test scores. And it doesn't matter whether it's test scores or not. It's what it does for the quality of life. So I would absolutely think piloting it. You know, one of the things, therapeutic horseback riding, which is an odd thing, they came to me and wanted to use it. And I said, I'm not sending kids from the inner city to ride horses. Well, they found a small grant. It was amazing what it did for our students with autism. And it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't piloted it first. Now, could I give numbers to that? No, I can't. Can I give testimony from families, from children? And then the teachers come back and say, I didn't realize all the things he knew. But once he had that device, and I'm fascinated with the devices. I mean, then look what happened, and look what he was able to do. And he could finally tell us what he wanted. So I think the only way you're going to get it to spread is to pilot it. And I would approach some of the naysayers, some of the people that are saying, oh, this will never work. And, you know, because they're going to become your biggest advocates.
Excellent. This was a really, really helpful answer. The last thing that you said, I will try to do this very fast, because you were very right about that. Thank you so much.
And anytime could do anything to help you, let me know.
Yeah, you are in Indianapolis, right?
I'm in Indianapolis, but yeah.
That's good. We went there, we stayed there for 10 days. We tried to knock in some doors inside the schools, but we couldn't. But I would love to connect.
Well,
so I will ask Mr. Ken.
Maybe I can be your voice in some of those situations.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
I tell you,
Great.
my goal now is to volunteer to help to use the knowledge that I've spent 100 years developing.
That's awesome.
You would make a great Rotarian. Jeremy, you make a great Rotarian. Allison, who's a member of our club, has her hand up.
Yeah, you know, our club is international, so I'm curious if you're aware of, I've worked on both sides of the K-12 system, as well as being a ADA 504 coordinator for a university. I'm curious if you're aware, I think, you know, there was a lot of interest within kind of the primary school years of this group, since that is an area that is lacking internationally in terms of inclusive education. Are you aware of any, in the United States, we have the Council for Exceptional Children, for example, of any international efforts to look at providing supports for children with disabilities in the primary years?
I'm not, but I could find them for you because I do have contacts with some university people that actually look internationally and work internationally. And so if you'd like, I can ask them because I'm sure there are some.
I think that would be an interest of this club. And then I know we're following the UN, I always call them the wrong thing, the Sustainable Development Goals around inclusive education. And there's some, partners around that. But yeah, it'd be helpful to know who else is working on this.
Yeah, I'll ask them, and because I have talked to them about it.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Mary Jo Dare. We very much appreciate this discussion and having you here. It actually helps us now kind of start a process that we were talking about as a club to work on a project as a club for this next Rotary year for education for people with disability, children with disabilities around the world. And before I go, I'm going to turn it over to Allison for a second, but Michael, did you have your hand up? I'm not sure where Michael, maybe Michael dropped off. He's in Kenya. you hear Michael?
No, Stephen had his hand up for a while as well. So he might still have.
Oh, okay, Stephen, Stephen, you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Stephen's from Kenya. He's a club member. He's a club member from Kenya.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ken. My question was, it was not really a question, but the discussion that you're having about the transition of students from maybe the lower to the next level of education. And when you're talking about the needs for the need for the universities or colleges or even high school to have a directorates of disabilities, it clicked to my mind that it's really critical and is something that is really, really important. And I can proudly say that, like the institution that I was in at the university, they have that docket, they have a full directorate of disability services. So once the students enter into that university, they're able to register with that department or the directorate. Then you see now all the needs they're kept in the system. So the kinds of disabilities and every kind of accommodation is kept in the system. When they are doing an exam, the directorate is able to allocate them in a specific, let's say, for example, if they are visually impaired, they have to be allocated the time according to the university policy. Then they also need to be in a conducive environment, like they're not kept in a place where there is a lot of noise. So it's really critical, and it should start right from the lower levels of education. It's not only it should start at the college or the university. No, it should start in the lower levels. And all this, as I've been always saying, it's not a one-man show. It is a collective responsibility. The parents should be there. If at all, it goes down to the level of our primary school or the secondary junior school. To make sure that this goes well and they're able to get help. So I really like how Dr. Mary and all the participants have contributed, and the example that Ralph was really giving. every child, I believe every child can access education and he can interact well with the society. So that was my contribution. Thank you so much.
I agree with you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much. And I'm going to, if there are no other questions, Michael, you had your hand up, Michael?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. It's evening here and morning in the US. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, Michael, we can hear you.
Okay, my network is not good. This is Michael Anguria, Rotarian from Soroti Rotary Central. We're in Eastern Uganda. So we also have 2 schools for children with disabilities. One school is for children who are deaf, and then the other children who are blind. And many of them have very urgent needs, especially they are looked as children, mischief, children who have been rejected. And most of them will share their testimonies. Their mothers have been abandoned, chased by their spouses. And there's a lot of domestic violence, gender-based violence in their families, and they are very poor and they need help. So I just wanted to share and thank those who have presented. And through Rotary and my organization, we try to support them, but there is very little support that these children get. So we have the schools. The school, I will give you details. And you can come and see really how these children need. They need the children with disabilities, especially blind and deaf children. Those are the ones that are considered to be the worst in communities where they come. When you go and visit the children and you talk to them, the children cry just at school because they really have challenges at home. And I'm happy with the discussion. So I just wanted also to present the position of Rotary clubs, where I am and my organization. And we're looking for partners who can come and work with us in Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate what you're doing there. And I'm going to turn this over now to Allison. As I mentioned, our club is taking on the project of education for children with disabilities globally. And Alice is going to give some details of that project.
Thanks, Ken. So we've had a lot of interest from our friends across the world about working on this project around inclusive education. So we've taken the process that we're going to kind of follow is a Rotary process around doing an environmental scan and looking at what that could look like, committees, subcommittees, stuff, things like that. So many folks in the Friends WhatsApp group responded to this call out. So we have a large list of interested folks. What would help us is what we did was Anita was very helpful in taking all of that information and putting it in a Google Sheet, but we want to collect some more information so that we can utilize some tools. So I'm going to put this link in the chat and we'll put it in the WhatsApp to initially get information from folks on how to connect, what time zones you're in, what's your specific interest, etc. And then we'll start kind of a series of meetings around what could this look like. And from that, committees will be created or some sort of structure, to work on, is it, multiple pieces, or is it one large committee? Because we've had a great response to this. So that's the easiest kind of route for us right now to get information out to everybody and is to collect everyone's information, because we know that we have lots of friends of the club that find us in many different ways.
Thank you, Allison. And as you can imagine, it's a big project. It's a big subject, education for children with disabilities. So what we need to do in order to be effective is to narrow it down to a specific areas that we could we can work as a club and with the helps of the friends. And Allison is doing that get that organized. And this is part of that process of getting us started in an organized manner. I appreciate Dr. Mary Jo, and thank you, Jeremy, for getting us an outstanding speaker today. I'm going to turn this over for some closing comments to one of our club members, Anne, who is from Kenya, and I'll let Anne introduce herself.
I'm gonna jump off, but just let me know if there's anything in the future that I can do to help.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Jo. Anne, are you there? Okay, I'm not sure how your internet is, Anne. Sorry, maybe she's having some internet problems. So she's from Kenya. She's working with Club Foot, helping make manual shoes actually for people with club foot. She's manually making each shoe. It's a wonderful project. I know Ralph and his club from Bedford have been very supportive of that project, and we're so thankful for that. So we appreciate the work that Anne does. One of the things with Club Foot particular is it doesn't quite get the same recognition globally as other disabilities do. So it doesn't look like she has a connection. So much appreciate everybody for coming. It's a very important subject, and by the interest that people have shown globally on the subject, it's a very important subject globally. And we look forward to continue to work on this project and to continue to try to define some areas that we as Rotary can work on. And we hope also to have other Rotary clubs around the world join us and help us out once we get to the point of defining what exactly is we're working on. So much appreciate you all coming. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Excellent presentation.